Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of leaders here in the United States and then beyond. Today with us, New York State Assembly member Rebecca Seawright. Let's all welcome Rebecca. And Rebecca, it is a real pleasure to have you back on Successful Philanthropy. And
Thank you.
Happy to have you. And I'd like to first start with a little bit about your history. You were elected in 2014 and you keep getting reelected. You must be doing something right. Tell us a little bit about what you're involved with and what right now is your top priority.
Well, thank you, Jean. It's great to be back on your show again. And I admire so much all of your leadership for various causes, the American Humane Society and the Women's Foundation and Mission Society. And, right now is budget time in New York State. And according to the Constitution, we have to adopt a state budget by April 1st. So it's March Madness in Albany at the state capitol as we negotiate and prioritize what should be in the state budget and how much each should get. As you know, we fund our prisons and transportation and public schools and public urban universities. So there's a lot of different causes competing for those funds in Albany. But last legislative session got second passage. It takes two passages for a state constitutional amendment on the Equal Rights Amendment. So voters are going to see for the first time ever an Equal Rights Amendment in November during the presidential election year on the ballot, the opportunity to vote for an expanded equality amendment. And in the state assembly, I chair the People with Disabilities Committee. And one of the categories that's receiving protection in that constitutional amendment is the protection against discrimination for disabled people, people with disabilities, intellectual and developmental.
Very, very important. And why, I know why, but tell our audience why the Equal Rights Amendment is so important. It's not passed, has not passed in New York State, and it's also not part of the US Constitution. Why is it so important, and what does it actually mean to women and other people?
Those are great questions, Jean. And as we were hammering out the legal language for it, we decided if we're going to update our Constitution, we should update it for a broad category of classes. The Constitution, Section 11, has not been updated since 1938. And 156 years ago, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frederick Douglass and a lot of suffragettes traveled to Albany to lobby for an Equal Rights Amendment. Can you imagine 156 years later, we're finally getting the opportunity to vote on it on the ballot this November. And why we need it is because in New York, you think of us as a progressive state. We have a strong human rights law, but that law can be overturned. And with a constitutional amendment, you can't overturn it. So regardless of who's in a leadership position serving the executive branch or in the Assembly or Senate, the constitutional amendment, the Equality Amendment, we'll call it the ERA, will always be in place once it's passed. And if it were a state statute, it could be overturned. So that's the main reason that we want those extra protections in our Constitution. And we're hoping it'll give us momentum to get this done on a federal level in Washington.
All very, very important. And just from a practical point of view, does that mean after this is passed that women will get the same paycheck as men? Or what exactly, how does this passage translate into actual fact of things happening?
Our data and statistics show that women still make less than men on the average dollar, and women of color even make less. So This is going to ensure pay equity among the sexes. It's going to ensure reproductive autonomy for women. It's going to assure that people with disabilities are not discriminated against. And it's going to ensure anti-discrimination against our elderly people who've served their dues to society. So we should be doing more to protect our senior citizens. And so this is a very good constitution, as well as to protect our LGBTQ brothers and sisters against discrimination. And we know that since COVID and the war, that we're seeing more and more hate crimes. I was pleased to sponsor and pass 2 pieces of hate crime legislation in Albany that the governor signed into law. And we want to do all we can to strengthen our hate crimes and to educate our population that it's just not acceptable to discriminate against people.
All very, very important for sure. Now, Rebecca, I wanted to bring up immigration. We've seen a very large, massive influx of immigrants coming into New York City and into our state. What is the state doing to handle this? And is it controlled now? Or a lot of people think that we have not been able to help the immigrants enough. We haven't been able to help other people enough. What are your thoughts here?
I think this is really a federal issue, and what we need Congress to do is step up and pass a very good, thorough immigration policy at our federal level. And, New York is a sanctuary state, so we're receiving a strong, migrant population, and they want to be put to work. And so what we need to do, and I encourage all of our viewers out there to write your congressperson, write your United States Senator here in New York. It's Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, and encourage them to put in place a federal immigration bill. And that's going to take bipartisan support among both sides in order to get that passed and to get it done. And that's what we need to see on a federal level, which will impact New York State, hopefully in a very positive way.
Yes, and now you've also worked a lot with the LGBTQ community. Describe a little bit about what you've done and what else you think we need to do.
So right now I have a piece of legislation in Albany, recruited Senator Brad Hoylman to carry it in the state Senate, who's an openly gay man. And this legislation would teach about our LGBT history in New York State and prevent and educate against discrimination against LGBT people. And New Jersey passed this bill several years ago. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't pass it in New York State. And so we need to do all we can. Recently, we put in some allocation and funding for the transgender community. And one piece of legislation that I passed last year in Albany was for the intersex community, so that the Department of Health could issue pamphlets and educational materials to the parents of young intersex infants. Some of the biggest offenders are occurring right here on the Upper East Side, which are the urologists in the medical field at Weill Cornell Hospital. And so my legislation simply requires the Department of Health to give out educational information, because there are intersex people who do not want the surgery at birth. They want to be able to get a little older and make that decision for themselves when it's not medically necessary. So we're focusing on a lot of good legislation. This session, I also passed a bill that would require 60% of the appointees to the state developmentally disabled council board of directors to be comprised of people that do have a disability, so that they're actually helping to make the rules and the laws that govern that community. And so that's very important. And recently I attended a wheelchair college basketball game, and it's the CUNY City University of New York, largest public urban university in the United States, has one of only 7 women's wheelchair basketball teams in the nation. And it was just so exciting and fascinating to see this team compete. Can you imagine throwing a basketball from a sitting wheelchair while the wheelchair is moving? And what a challenge that is. And, you know, team sports is a great thing. And so to be able to offer wheelchair basketball to the disabled community who are college students, I think is just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Yes, and I do feel that the disabled population has a situation where it's difficult for them to find jobs, to hold jobs, and there is discrimination, and that discrimination needs to end. And anything that our legislators can do to help people with disabilities, I think, is absolutely wonderful. Now, you've also been very involved in women's health. And of course, I'm a woman, and many people watching this show are women. And what exactly have you been involved with?
A few years ago, Jean, I passed a 3D mammography bill that requires insurance to pay for 3D mammograms without a copay or deductible. An elderly woman walked into my storefront community office here on the Upper East Side in Manhattan and said, "Rebecca, my physician has prescribed a 3D mammogram, but my insurance is refusing to pay for it." And I said, "Well, that is absolutely not right. It's not acceptable. I'm going to go back to Albany, to the Capitol. I'm going to pass legislation, and we're going to fix that." And that's exactly what we did. Some of the best ideas for legislation come from my constituents. I spoke at the National Conference of Health in Georgia, and now this legislation is being replicated around the country, requiring insurance companies to cover 3D mammography for women and men. I lost a colleague, Assemblyman Simanowicz, a few years ago to breast cancer. Men get breast cancer as well as women. And this year, I have sponsored legislation that will allow screenings to be covered by insurance for second-degree relatives that have had a history of breast cancer. And so this is an important bill to be able to expand the scope of what is allowed in terms of screening for breast cancer. And early detection, as we know, is just key. Very fortunate, Jean, to have 8 hospitals in my district here on the Upper East Side. And of course, one of them is Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is a nationally recognized institution treating cancer. And so I've worked very closely with MSK on legislation over the years to strengthen our laws in Albany. And so we're going to continue to push for the passage of this new legislation. I'm very excited. It's Assembly Bill 8387, and we're currently taking co-sponsors on the bill. So write your legislator, him or her, and request that they co-sponsor this bill. And we also provide a free 3D mammogram scan van that comes in front of our office several times a year. And it's a mobile van that you can get a mammogram. And we also provide that on Roosevelt Island as well. We have a very, very busy storefront office, community office. We loan out our boardrooms to nonprofit organizations. We have shredding events, tax preparation events, a free housing clinic for people that need a free pro bono attorney. And the next scan van for mammograms will be on Wednesday, April 10th. So if you'd like to sign up for our viewers, please call 212-288-4607 and register for the free mammogram scan van, which will be on April 10th, right here on York Avenue and 79th Street.
And for our audience, we are with Rebecca Seawright. She is a New York State Assemblywoman representing parts of Manhattan and Roosevelt Island. Rebecca, you've also been very involved with helping the elderly, and most of us feel that we need to do more for the elderly, that they're a bit neglected. And what exactly have you been involved with?
So we were very involved with partnering our high school students up with an elderly person that needed technology help with their cell phones or with their iPad or their computer. High school kids need some community service credit. Our senior citizens sometimes are experiencing challenges with their phone or their computer. And so what better way to bring these two communities together? I've also given grant funding to the New York Senior Citizen Foundation, to Search and Care. These are wonderful nonprofit organizations that focus specifically on senior citizens, either with respite care or helping to keep people in their homes. The Carter Burden Center is right here on the Upper East Side and also on Roosevelt Island. We're giving grant money to the Carter Burden Center, as well as the Lenox Hill Neighborhood House Senior Citizen Center. I think it's just so important that we help the senior population. We're going to all be seniors someday, and we all know our loved ones that are senior citizens. And so seniors get lonely. And so it's very important to call a senior citizen and check on them and offer to get their groceries or volunteer to deliver a hot meal to a senior citizen.
Also important, and really, we are very grateful that you're involved with all of this. Rebecca, also, you've been involved in affordable housing. Speak a little bit about that and exactly what you're doing in that arena.
Well, right now in Albany, Jean, we're negotiating an affordable housing plan and affordable housing legislation. But we need to not only make housing affordable, which is the number one issue in my district, we need to also make it accessible. And so we're looking at both of those issues. Oftentimes people forget that housing needs to be accessible, not just affordable. And so we're looking at bringing all the stakeholders together, the real estate developers, the tenant organizations, the representatives from the senior population, and looking at how can we build out some legislation that's going to take care of all the things that we need. It's going to put in tenant protections with good cause legislation. It's going to put in some version of a 421A tax exemption for developers. So we're looking right now in Albany, that's the hottest topic, is getting some affordable housing legislation in place as we negotiate the budget.
Rebecca, what's on the horizon next for you? Are you thinking of higher office or what?
Well, that's a $65 question, Jean. I am just so happy doing what I'm doing and serving the public. And we have a very, very busy storefront office here on York Avenue and 79th Street. Like I said, we have a free housing clinic with a pro bono attorney twice a month, and shredding events and tabling at street fairs, and passing good legislation in Albany and fighting for the resources to bring back to my district for our schools, for our transportation, our bus service, and our subways. That is my passion. And so I'm very happy doing that, and very grateful and honored to be reelected. I'm up for reelection again this June, and we'll be out on the streets petitioning, which is part of the legal process, starting February 27th. That runs till April 4th. And so if you see a long clipboard with a big green piece of paper, you know that it's time to sign a petition to get your elected officials on the ballot. It's part of the legal process. We've changed our voting laws. Now you can vote absentee. It's called no excuse absentee voting. And I encourage everyone to sign up and register to vote. And when your kids and grandkids turn 18, remind them that it's time to register to vote.
And is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't discussed?
I just want to encourage everyone to exercise their right to vote. And remember that in November, flip over your ballot and you will see constitutional amendments. And you'll see the equality amendment that we've discussed.
All very important. And Rebecca, this is sort of a funny question to ask, but you keep getting reelected. I would imagine nobody wants to run against you. How do you feel about the reelection over and over again? And do you think eventually someday you'll say, okay, I've had enough?
You never know what the future holds, but I think we've only just begun on passing good legislation and being responsive to the community, and there's always more work to do.
So I have a feeling Rebecca Seawright's going to continue on and on in government. Very, very interesting and very important because you've done a lot, not only for the people of New York City and Roosevelt Island, but for the people of New York State, and then really for our country. And then that multiplies and affects everybody around the world. If you had to say you have one priority for the year, what would that be? Or is that an impossible question to answer?
You know, as we look at a $177 billion budget that has to be adopted by April 1st, I would say the one priority is to carve out a budget that's going to help all groups of people, our senior citizens, our LGBT community, our people that are needing affordable housing, and our small businesses here on the Upper East Side that are looking for grant money, that are still bouncing back from COVID. So really carving out a great budget, multi-billion-dollar budget for the state of New York is the priority right now.
And then after that?
After that, we've got until the first week of June to pass really, really good legislation. And so I want to make sure that we continue to pass legislation that's responsive to my constituents here on the Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island, putting in some regulations on e-bicycles that are out of control. Every day I'm hearing from a constituent that has been affected by a bicycle and e-bike here on the Upper East Side, and that's why I'm sponsoring legislation that makes it a misdemeanor if you leave the scene of an accident, just like if you were in a car, a vehicle. If you're on an e-bike or a moped and there's an accident and you flee that scene, you will be prosecuted for a misdemeanor. And so we're updating the laws and we're making it much, much, much more stringent for our e-bikes.
Finally, what can we do about the crime situation in New York City? Crime seems to be on the rise, and what is the state doing and what is the city doing to sort of curtail it? To curtail crime, I think, is vitally important to people because they want to live safely in their cities and in their communities.
Right.
And I think controlling crime is very, very important.
Well, you know, Jean, you're absolutely right. People want to feel safe in their own homes. They want their old New York City back pre-COVID. They want to be able to go out to the local delis and stores and restaurants. And one of the beauties about New York is you can walk anywhere. You don't have to jump into a car. And so we want to keep our streets and our subways, our mass transit safe. And so what I want to do is increase our funding for the police cadet program so that we recruit new citizens into our police cadet program over at John Jay College and strengthen our community policing so that we have more police on the street. And the more you see police on the street, the safer you feel. And the safer you'll be.
And I like that. Rebecca, we have just about 1 minute left. What advice would you give to a young person, or maybe a not so young person, that wants to run for an elected position in government?
Well, first of all, I would encourage them to do it. I think it's wonderful to serve in public office. I've spent my life in public service. And so I think that I would encourage anyone that's looking forward to doing it to absolutely take the plunge and do it. But first, get some experience in a government office. We have wonderful internships year round. So if you'd like to apply for an internship in our office, you can write cwriter@nyassembly.gov or call us at 212-288-4607. We have a wonderful internship program that provides a stipend and college credit January to June in Albany at our state capitol. And we have summer internships and year-round internships in our district office. And so you get a taste and a flavor of what it's like by working as an intern in a government office before you take that plunge and actually run for office.
Thank you, Rebecca. You've been a wonderful guest. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. Our guest today, New York State Assembly member Rebecca Seawright. I'm Jean Shafiroff, your host. I'll see you next week.